I'm still shaking my head at the day's foolishness. Day 29 of Karen Read's trial wrapped up on Monday, and I couldn't even record this video yesterday because I was so just upset with Hank Brennan about it. It's a great day for a great day. I'm Sydney Rushing, and I'm a criminal defense attorney in the state of Michigan. Now let's talk about it. The morning started off with a few motions, the first one being that the defense was trying to limit Dr. Rentschler's testimony. However, Judge Cannoni said she was not ready for that one yet. The prosecution also had a motion for rebuttal witnesses. There's two witnesses that the defense is arguing against that the prosecution was to call in regards to dog bites. And the defense also wants Welcher's testimony to be limited, and that makes perfect sense. As you can likely guess, Judge Cannoni granted the motion for the prosecution to call rebuttal witnesses, and the prosecution had a motion to exclude testimony from Dr. La Posada. They say that she shouldn't be able to testify anything regarding dog bites because she doesn't have like the history or the experience like Dr. Russell had, and Judge Cannoni said she would have a little voir dire on it. I'm also going to start this off by saying I got to fix a mistake. Dr. Wolf is actually witness number 8. I had 2 witnesses marked as witness number 3, so that put my counting off, so Dr. Wolf is witness number 8. Dr. Wolf was back on the stand, and Jackson continued his redirect examination. Rescue Randy, the crash dummy, was back to being the topic of discussion. Photos of the clothing that Rescue Randy was wearing during the testing were shown. The photos showed that there was road rash to the clothing, plus some holes, and there was some more learning about kinetic energy. Said that kinetic energy is used in accident reconstruction. And then Jackson joked around with him and said, "Stop it immediately. His head might explode if he goes down into these really specific units," and he's like, "That's enough, no more." On recross, Brennan had Wolf confirm that he did not talk to the defense over the weekend. Talked again about the weight difference between the crash dummy's arm and John's arm. Brennan then tried discrediting Wolf and talked again about his credentials. There was a sidebar over this, and actually during this entire testimony, there was a ton of objections and tons of sidebars. So much so that Cannoni was really just irritated with it, and she said the jury's fed up with it too. Brennan then tried saying that Rescue Randy was actually a mannequin that's used by firefighters and not a crash dummy, and Wolf said he didn't agree with that interpretation. Then came in the very big deal. Brennan started asking Wolf about his testing with the clothing, asking did he take into consideration the size, was the sweatshirt new, was it worn, what the materials were, things like that. Then he brought out John's sweatshirt and started asking him questions about the holes in the back of the sweatshirt. Wolf said the holes in the back of that sweatshirt are not consistent with road rash. He was asked specifically if he took the holes in the back of John's sweatshirt into consideration when coming to his opinions, and he said no. And there's a really specific reason as to why that was his answer, but I'll get to that. Then the picture was placed behind Wolf, but it's in view of the jury, so the entire time for the rest of his testimony, all they're seeing is this sweatshirt. And then there was a brief redirect where there was a mic drop moment because Brennan made a big deal about this crash dummy and using the hybrid version of this thing, and Jackson said, "Do you know who else used a hybrid, this exact dummy, in their testing for their drop testing?" And he said, "Yes, Welcher. That's the Commonwealth's experts, and they use the same dummy. So now you look like a dummy, Brennan." Then Crash Daddy's testimony concluded, but then we got Alessi on fire out here with a motion for a mistrial. This was a motion for a mistrial with prejudice, meaning they couldn't reissue this case, and this was due to the intentional conduct that had just happened, according to Alessi. This is regarding the hoodie that Brennan was just questioning Wolf about. So if you remember, Brennan asked Wolf if these holes in the back of John's shirt were, caused one way or the other and falling backwards and all that. And guess what? The holes in that sweatshirt were never there. There is 2 photos that the prosecution left out that showed the back of the sweatshirt, which had no damage to it, and then the cuts that were made from the criminologist to do testing on it. And there's these 2 photos that the prosecution did not put in their case in chief, and yet they're holding the sweatshirt up there asking this witness if he considered these holes or these things in his analysis, and they don't apply, not in one bit, because they literally were not there. Those were put there by the Commonwealth. Brennan basically got up there and just said, "It appears I made a mistake." And he said, though, that the remedy should be a curative instruction for the jury. It ended up being what the answer was to all this. Of course, Judge Cannoni denied it. However, the curative instruction she gave was not curative in any shape or form. It was a literal, simple one-liner. It was nothing like what she was saying on the record prior, how she was going to tailor this down. And she didn't even do what Brennan asked her to do, which was to strike that testimony from the jurors, tell them that they can't consider it and all that. She didn't even do that. Defense then called witness witness number 9, John Tiedemann, to the stand. He's a private investigator and a former federal agent. On direct, Yannetti had him introduce himself. He said that basically he was contacted by the defense last week because one of their other people were sick and couldn't make it, so he stepped in to testify. He traveled to 34 Fairview on June 3rd and did some measuring. Then lunch was served. While the jurors were at lunch, Judge Cannone did a voir dire of Dr. Elizabeth Posada. Defense wants to call her to also be able to talk about the dog bite wounds, and the prosecution doesn't want her to. After lunch, it's clear at this point that Judge Cannone is just fed up with the defense. Judge Cannone denied the motion to allow La Posada to talk about the dog bites, and she basically said that she didn't have the same credentials that Russell did, and that's the difference. She will allow her to talk about John's injuries and her opinions as a medical examiner. And she can also testify to injuries and non-injuries. Witness number 9 was back on the stand, and Yannetti talked about those measurements that he took. He said it was 66 feet from the mailbox to the main entrance, and then 70 feet to a side door, and then 78 feet to the garage door entrance. On cross, Brennan was very short and basically asked him about the measurements and using a wheel measure thing, and he explained how his process worked, and that was it. And witness number 10, Dr. Elizabeth La Posada, was called to the stand. She's a forensics pathologist and a former medical examiner. Jackson did the direct, and obviously we got the credentials out of the way. He explained what undetermined in a person's manner of death means. He went through all of the documents and things that she reviewed for this case, and it's a lot of reading if you ask me. She talked about her experience conducting autopsies and also said it's a key thing for a medical examiner to also look at the clothing. Talked about John's head wound. She thinks that his injuries show a contre-coup injury. She said the tearing on the back of his head indicates that John fell backwards onto something that had a little ridge and was irregular in shape. He said he had massive skull fractures and that his brain was hemorrhaging into his spinal cord. Also, the spinal cord is called the medulla spinalis. And this is not to be confused with the medulla oblongata. Yes, that's a Waterboy reference, and I get it. It's not funny, so let's get on with it. She said flat out that John's head injury could not have been caused from falling backwards onto a flat surface. And then the defense kind of reached a wall of where they could continue her questioning, so judge sent the jury home for the day. The attorneys remained, and they talked about what documents could be discussed and what couldn't be discussed. The defense says that they have one witness left, and the Commonwealth has rebuttal witnesses lined up. Cannone is also very fed up, and she thinks that the attorneys are wasting the jurors' time unnecessarily. Her patience was completely gone today from the get-go, if I'm being honest. At the end of the day, a little waste of the jury's time is so minute to the time that Karen Read is facing. That is major. So let's think about that. Not to mention, the defense wouldn't be asking for so many sidebars and objections if Brennan just played by the rules and wasn't so damn shady. And I'm just gonna end my rant there on that note because I feel like I could go on and on. So that wraps up day 29, and court will continue tomorrow morning on day 30. And will the defense rest tomorrow, or will they need additional time? We'll find out then. Thanks for being here. Thanks for following along. And here's your question of the day. Do you think Judge Cannone got it wrong by denying the motion for the mistrial? Let me know in the comments.